And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Ryan Galli, guide for humanity, one of the holy Kumaras and psychic, who has had many spiritually transformative experiences, which we will talk about today and more. Ryan, thank you for joining me and welcome.
Thanks for having me today. I really appreciate it.
Ryan, instead of starting right up with your backstory or your spiritually transformative experiences, I first want to ask, what are the holy Kumaras and how did you discover that you are one of them?
So it's interesting because the holy Kumaras are spoken about in the Hindu text, and there's a lot of discrepancies in those texts. And for people to kind of get a grasp of consciousness per se, a lot of these religions, these major religions, and I wouldn't say even the Hindu text is a religion, but a lot of these texts were written in a time during we'll call it ego level of consciousness. And so there was a lot of distortion and a lot of misunderstandings in those texts. And that being said, the holy Kumaras there's 7 of them, and one of the main we call Sanat Kumara. His other name is also called Kartikeya, which is the son of the Pleiades. And the story of this character starts with consciousness in the beginning, just consciousness floating around before it had that initial thought. And from that initial thought, it created what we called Sophia, which just means wisdom. And we also perceived it as a feminine energy, but was androgynous. And the energy of Sophia, then consciousness decided to birth itself through Sophia, and that's how you came with Kartikeya or Sanat Kumara. Now, both of these were androgynous energies, but we view them as divine masculine and divine feminine. And the separation from that point, from Sanat Kumara, which is where all rays emanate from, so like that prism and the 7 rays of the rainbow, the 7 rays come through Sanat Kumara, and some people call them archangels, some people call them these 7 Kumaras or the 7 rays, the 7 colors. And so each one has a color. And from my understanding and what's come to me over time is that I am of a blue ray. So people know of the indigos. The blue rays are also involved. They're, I would say, more ancient in terms of fractals. And I like to use the word fractal because for me, everything is a fractalization from the initial experience, from that initial manifestation or projection. And I think that when we look at history, so when we go back past Atlantis, which some know of as Lemuria, in that time we were in the last period of 5D, which is what we're entering now, so to speak. People label that next level of consciousness or the age of Aquarius as that 5D experience. That initial experience in Lemuria was 5D, but it was in a time of what we'll call the feminine, where we worship the goddess, which was the worship of Sophia. And beautiful time of the feminine. That time came to a cycle, a circle and an ending. And at the end of that cycle, we had where women per se would kind of took advantage of the man, which is still ingrained into a lot of our DNA. And now we're witnessing that cycle kind of again in reverse, where the masculine is kind of dominating the feminine. Now, in the time of Atlantis, let me go back. In the time of Lemuria, the king of the world, his name was Sanat Kumara. And Sanat, before he came to Earth, was the king of Venus. And this is where the holy Kumaras are known from. It's that planet of love and that connection to that planet. And some say that we're coming from the 4th world now and venturing into the 5th world on Earth. And that 5th world, whether it be Christ consciousness, some also call it the world of love or the world of Venus, the next transition. And it's that time of union, and it's never happened in the history of the universe. So we've had that feminine period, that masculine period, and now we're heading into union. And the connection back to Venus, which is really important to understand, is, and I'm not even sure a lot of people are aware of this, but when Venus does its orbit around Earth, its 8-year progression, it creates very distinct symbols. And one of the symbols is well known and is across many flags and many churches, but it's the symbol of the rose, the 5-petal rose. And it also makes the symbol of the pentagram or the star. And that's been it's been demonized, basically, that symbol of Lucifer, that symbol of now transitioned into even the symbol of Satan, however you want to perceive that. But both of those symbols are literally the symbol of divine masculine and feminine. So that the rose is the feminine, makes a lot of sense, and the star is the masculine, which also makes a lot of sense. And it's the union of those symbols to understand that there is only one blue white light energy that runs through everything. It keeps my heart beating, keeps your lungs breathing, keeps the birds flying and the fishes swimming. It's the energy through everything. The only reason we perceived it as feminine and masculine as separate was just levels of awareness, levels of consciousness, experiences that consciousness wanted to experience on its way to union. Almost like we needed to taste the sour or the darkness of each period to kind of fully taste into the sweetness of union, what's kind of what we're transitioning through now, into now.
Let me stop you for 1 second here.
Sure.
I want to orient myself with what you are saying. So if you add God or source to this equation of Sanat Kumara and the initial consciousness, where would that fit in?
Well, God, consciousness, source, all of these words to describe the same energy. Sanat Kumara would be the male, the masculine deity, the God that we worship now. And it's only, again, if you think about the great god Thoth from Egypt, and I like to even think of it as thought, because he said that everything is basically mental. So everything is a conscious thought. That's where we get the word consciousness from, right? It's God just evolved into that new understanding. And so Sanat Kumara is basically that energy that we worship as God in this masculine period.
So Sophia is the feminine version of that source, right?
Which was what we celebrated in Lemuria, which was what we worshipped during Lemuria, was the feminine version. But again, when you understand that they are literally androgynous, and it was our perception at each period that called them masculine and feminine, it's the only reason why we use those words. It's all the level of awareness or perception of that. And so I feel like as through my journey and through these levels of awareness and the shift that I've gone through, based on the fractalage that I am, based on the amount of remembrance that is stored in my DNA, it allows me to tap into a kind of an understanding that not all fractals are able to tap into. So I'm speaking a perception. I'm allowing a perception to come through me for others to feel into. It's interesting because when you hear Bashar speak about it, he speaks about this and that, not this or that. So each of us has a unique perception. None of them are wrong. They're just allowing us to feel or have feedback off each other. This is truly what we're doing. We're guiding each other home to the heart.
If you take this initial consciousness, like you said, and then what happened to it is it was separated, to me it sounds like through a prism, and you got the 7 colors or 7 layers or levels, the 7 Kumaras, right?
Yeah, again, they wordings to describe a situation from a level of awareness. Again, it's literally, for me, the understanding is that those first 2 were basically mirror images of each other, that divine, that fire energy, that primordial fire that we speak about. And it's from that point on that, I believe that when our heart breaks, per se, that's when we fractal. Because for me, my experience over the last year has been healing many moments from many lifetimes. And it's in that essence, we're calling all pieces of ourselves back. And when we're doing that, we're kind of bringing the fractals back to wholeness, is what we're trying to kind of rest in consciously, is that wholeness that we truly are anyways. That, it's just a thought that we aren't. So the fractalization from that initial point from Sanat Kumara and then onward, we create the twins, which is basically the first fractal of Sanat Kumara. So you'll have what is known as Sanat Sananda and Sanat Lucifer. Now, there's stories in Theosophy that talk about Sananda being the energy that came into Jesus or Yeshua, whatever, however you want to call that name. And then it's the understanding too that we have these people that speak about the same remembrances of the same lives, the same past lives. Like, how can that happen? Well, through fractalization. So if you have remembrance or you fractals from that early that period, there be more than one fractalization that will have the understanding of that life. And now there's new souls per se. New souls have the ability to tap into these old stories, but they won't have lived them. So the remembrance will be much different. It won't be a feeling into so deeply like what happens in a QHT session, like Dolores' sessions. Those feelings are profound when you've experienced those. It's like you're literally the experience that I had was unbelievable. I was in that moment. Where for many they can have flashes, they can have dreamlike situations, but it's not a feeling into process as deep as that. So yeah, the understanding of Sanat Kumara and how that fractaled and just kind of sitting in that understanding, it's all consciousness. And I think we get wrapped up in these stories of bloodlines and even like this soul line. It's whether you're here, whether you're on the other side, whether you're in another dimension, it's all consciousness. It's all a thought. Nothing is less real and more real. It's just levels of awareness. And I think people can get lost in that.
So are you saying that all of us collectively are still part of the initial consciousness that put everything in motion? Or just
Yeah, and
individual fractals or individual pieces?
exactly, experiencing itself in a different form in this kind of what came to me recently was really interesting about all of this in a real simple form. And it was watching. I had kind of had an experience with where I was perceiving some negative energy, and I had some friends that are psychics and healers, and they could see this negative energy on me, and I started to sit into it a bit more. And kind of I went on this walk and some clarity was coming to me, and it was basically saying it's all energy, Ryan. The light and the dark, these are all just perceptions, good and evil. It's just a perception of the mind. And that may be hard for certain people to hear at different levels of awareness, but it's the truth. And what was shown to me was like an iMac screensaver. They've got one where it's just colors, kind of like energy floating on the screen. And that's really what's happening in all forms of consciousness, that anything that's being witnessed or experienced, it's just energy dancing with itself. And what we've done is, if you can imagine when a 3D gamer creates with those lines, and he's just kind of creating the mapping system, and then he needs to add skins over everything to kind of create a deeper experience. That's whether you're here, there, or on the other side, or it's all that. It's just an overlay. And energy has decided to create, or consciousness has decided to create that overlay on top of the energy that it is. And from that place of understanding, to me, it makes everything really simple. And for me, coming to as a breathwork instructor and healer, and even a healing facilitator, I'll call it, because I don't like to be called a healer, but it's truly about finding your breath, which brings you to the present moment. And the reason it's called the present is because it's the gift that God gave us. Right. And when you can sit in the present moment and not think about leaving the body, and not thinking about what's happening on the other side and what's happening tomorrow and next year and last year, which is just taking us out of the reality, which is now, which is every moment, which is, I think even people have a hard time understanding that the past lives, none of them are past. They're all happening now. I'm still moving into that level of awareness of fully grasping that concept still, but I know it. It's been said to me enough times that I understand it, the importance of the breath and being in the now, being in this moment with you.
Now, in the beginning, I said you are one of the holy Kumaras. Aren't we all one of the Kumaras ultimately? We're all a fractal of it.
So this is a good question too. So Bashar was actually just speaking about this on the weekend, I heard as well, and I got a download a couple weeks ago. I'll use that word download because I think people can understand that. But um, eh, how we'll learn in this experience is through a mirror, right? And you hear that a lot. Everything's kind of being mirrored to us. Why? What's happening? Well, we have this frequency inside of us that we carry into this plane. And generally that frequency is the lessons we need to learn. And so that's where we'll have, like, I believe our natural frequency is our heart space. That's why we're having to come home to the heart. And the separation, or the seven chakras, are the experience of separation. So these are the different levels of emotion, different levels of awareness. And we basically carry this frequency inside of us. So if I carry a frequency of feeling not good enough, or if I carry a frequency of guilt and shame, and that's my lesson coming into this plane, I'm going to be met generally in my first experience with my parents. And my parents are going to create situations, or I'm projecting situations with them involved. They've agreed to kind of be here to do this with me and have that experience. But they're going to put me through periods of guilt and shame. And that'll be my first experience with that. And as I move through life and I don't deal with that lesson 100%, and I have to keep it's a longer lesson, I'll meet that in people at my job. I'll meet that with family. I'll meet that with, it's just a lesson that's going to keep being reflected back to me. So in that sense, yes, we are one. That's the big concept. But then you're going to get to a point where the mirror shatters. And that's just what Bashar was speaking about recently. And so when that mirror shatters, you start to see the uniqueness in each piece. And so, although, yes, we are one in that concept of the one blue white light energy that runs through everything, but in the same experience that we are experiencing here, the mirror has also shattered, and we have to see the uniqueness in each individual. So would I say that I'm special because I'm a Kimura? No. But do I have a reason to be here? Of course. I hold a great remembrance that needs to be felt into. Do others have the capability to do that right now? There's other fractals in my soul family that I've met in this lifetime that also have a great remembrance. Can I feel into many people that are kind of not as ancient? Yes, I can. I can feel that they don't have the capacity to tap into that because it's not stored in their DNA.
All right, so what are you remembering with this great remembrance, and how did you come to start remembering it?
So it's interesting. So I again, my life story is quite dark. I had a lot of physical abuse, mental abuse. Was put in jail. My sister was assaulted, and I kind of made a mistake and went to talk to the guy. So I did every drug under the sun to kind of as a tool to suppress trauma that I experienced. And then about 5 years ago, I had a business that I'd been working on for about 25 years. It was bankrupted, wasn't paid. I had another business that I was transitioning to, and my $1 million partner ended up killing himself. And I kind of was there with him, watching that whole experience. It was dark. Then I ended up having to walk away from that business, left a few $100,000 on the table for that. That was the beginning of my awakening, the deep beginning, because I do now, looking back about 10 years before that, I remember when my ears started ringing. And some cultures will say that that's the sound of God, the sound of people that are awakening now, they'll notice frequency shifts when the energy is changing on the planet. Their ears start to ring. Mine have been ringing nonstop for close to 10 years now. But that major part of the awakening for me, that real jolt, happened then. I like to describe it as, humans are walking around with these wet blankets of trauma their whole life in the dark, and we're always questioning what path we need to be on, and eventually we get this jolt for this part of the awakening, and what happens is one of those blankets ends up falling off, and there's a crack of light coming through, and now we're curious and we want to explore that light. And through the journey, we start to learn how to peel these blankets off with the power of forgiveness. And then eventually we're standing there and we realize the light was coming from us the whole time. And we've always been on the path. We've never veered from it. There's never a possibility to veer from it, really. You're kind of in a tunnel experience, which I'll share later. But And so I feel like when you understand that aspect of it, and you're realizing that your journey is really learning how to peel off the wet blankets of trauma, which are just your thoughts on the old experience that you're holding onto yourself, right? So if I went through my experience with abuse, physical abuse, mental abuse, and in that perception, so what my level of awareness was still very heavy ego consciousness, I'm pointing fingers at people, you did this to me. But then as you go through this experience, you start to understand, oh, it's all happening through me, for me. And if these souls were connected to me beforehand, I chose this experience to come down and project this to experience for soul growth. And so as we're up there, if you want to visualize us up in the clouds, before we come down here, it is the most like, for people, I've experienced this samadhi feeling where you're in the most pure loving bliss, and if you're in that experience, it's how much love do those soul family members have to come down here to play that character of the abusive mother or the alcoholic father, they have to have the most love, because it's crazy to come down and play that character, right, for somebody else's growth. And so from that, my perception starts to change, and now I can start to see them in a different light, and now I can start to release the heaviness of my thoughts. And when you start to understand that your thoughts are really what's affecting each different chakra. So if it's fear that you hold, it affects your root chakra. And then what manifests there? Oh, a bad back, or problems with your legs. Or if you've got, for me, a lot of people that experience abuse will have gut issues. Why? Because the confidence is killed. And so the opposite of confidence, right, is in that solar chakra. So if we can start to go into and release these emotions, all of a sudden these manifestations go away. And what I've healed in my body, just simply, I'm watching other people heal just simply from releasing their thoughts on their perception on the old experience, and starting to work their way through, which is the expansion, which is kind of what we're doing in that ascension process, is expanding our level of awareness, expanding our viewpoints on consciousness. And even in the word level, I don't want to use levels because it's only a way to describe it, because it's literally like, again, that waveform of energy, like an octopus. We're all perched on these different perspective points. So I wouldn't say it's like level, it being linear. It's really just perspective points all over the place.
What manifests when a person has problems with their throat chakra?
So easy, and this is a really easy fix too. So I generally started with healing with my hands, and when I had throat chakra issues, putting my hand next to my throat, visualizing my heart energy coming through my hand and sending loving intention to that space, you can heal that space pretty quickly. But if you're not getting to the root of the cause, which is not speaking your truth, right? And so when you realize, you start to really analyze it, and this is why we call them shadows, because some people, for face value, when you look, you're like, oh, I'm speaking my truth. Where am I not speaking my truth? But if you can learn to peel back, that's what it's peeling an onion. If you can learn to peel back the layers of that, you can start to really see where you're not speaking your truth. My wife's one for this, where she doesn't speak her truth, and she keeps meeting people at her work or her boss that keep putting her in positions where she's playing small. And so she's always got issues in her throat. And you can even have connections to your whether it be colds, headaches, some upper shoulder pain. Generally the shoulders are connected to your heart space, but that can still be all connected into the throat space.
Do you believe the best way to raise your frequency or vibration is to change your beliefs?
I would say that it's interesting about raising our vibration, again, is a level of awareness, right? I believe that somebody can go and understand that they're whole right now through some simple concepts. But raising your vibration is changing your thoughts. Yes. I think it's your level of awareness and your perception that keeps you weighted down, per se. right? That's what's affecting your other frequencies. That's why we're sitting in the lower density frequencies. Most people are in the root chakra, sacral chakra, and solar chakra. That's where we've been living for a long time. That's why a lot of the colors we see in restaurants and whatnot, all of these things are designed to keep us in that frequency of fear, right? It's an easy controlled frequency. And so the natural frequency is coming back to the heart. And for me, like my father, I didn't say I loved you or hug him until I was 40. And his father died at 25. And so when you look at it, it's generational energy. We never learned how to love each other, love ourselves, and then give love. Right. And so it's kind of hard to understand how to do that if you've never learned how to do that. And so it's a process of coming back home. It's a process of learning how to, I always say there's two doors to our hearts. One is the front door and one is the back. One is the giving of love and one is the receiving. It's that beautiful infinity symbol. And so to be able to even open up your front door, you need to be able to find forgiveness to these moments that have happened in the past. And by doing that, it's not about me calling these people and forgiving them. It's just finding forgiveness, which is releasing the thought on that experience. Through that, the front door opens. And all of a sudden, you're able to love freely. And it feels great. You're just giving it out. Your cup is perceivably full. But the truth is that when you're getting it in return now, as that infinity symbol is coming back to you, and it's bouncing off the back door. And so you're not actually able to feel into the love that you're giving and creating. And it's a broken process. So now you have to learn how to open up the back door, which is forgiving yourself. And so you got to go back into the moments where you think you've screwed up or you think you've wronged. And now you can open up your back door and now you can start to give and receive. So when I say, hey, Jeff, you look awesome today, man. Most people are quick, especially women, they're quick to say, oh, you look great too. And we don't actually take a moment to sit in the love that we are, right? It's uncomfortable for a lot of people. And it's when you start to give and receive, and then you start to really sit in that love and you practice self-love, which is something most people don't practice. That's when you start to sit in the frequency. So raising the vibration is really coming out of those lower density areas and coming into our natural space, right? And connecting with the higher frequencies. So that's my understanding. I think that people can get skewed with raising our vibrations and what all that really means. But I think if we can just focus on love and make that our driving force and our driving energy, it's easy peasy.
I like what you said. I mean, I may be saying it differently, but raising your vibration is done by increasing your level of awareness, which ultimately may be through new beliefs.
Yeah, I think again, it's interesting because it's not right or wrong. Again, it's your understanding and my understanding and how we're kind of describing it to each other. Again, we're at a period of time where we're still using words that are based on that patriarchal system and from that ego level of consciousness, and we're evolving into this next experience. This is why a lot of people are tapping into telepathy, because these words are getting in the way of truly what we're trying to express, right? And we're arguing over these semantics, God, source, this, that. Like it's still that level of awareness that's distorting.
All right. In the beginning, I said you are a guide for humanity. So to me, that means there's some message that you have for all of us. Is that true? And if so, what is it?
Definitely. So experiencing some breath work, some people call it holotropic. There's names, so many people have different names for breath work now. Again, we're putting our ego trying to create something that's coming through us or for us, right? But it's for me, it's deep belly breathing. And so deep belly breathing through the mouth, which will release emotions. Generally, I always teach to breathe through the nose, because that's how we should be breathing. It purifies the breath coming through the air. That's what the nose hairs are for. And we don't want those impurities coming through the mouth. But in this style of breath work, we'll call it, it's all done through the mouth because it's attached to our emotions. So when I first initially started to do that type of breath work, I had a crazy situation. I cried probably as hard as I've ever cried in my entire life. It was a really beautiful experience. And it was probably the most profound thing I've ever experienced in my life, doing this breath work. And again, I've tried every drug under the sun. for medicine and for suppressing trauma. But this breathwork which just blew my mind. And so as I ventured into this experience, I had two experiences which were quite profound. One where I ended up getting to a point where there was no more release, basically, and I sat in what some call samadhi. And I remember lying there in the most bliss, the most love I've ever experienced in my life. And the word love doesn't describe it. That's why they use samadhi. And I've had people share with me, what happens when they cross over and that feeling of love. And this is what that was. And so I'm lying there and I said to myself, I said, hey, well, to God consciousness, however you want to perceive that again. But I said, if you can take me now, you can take me now. I'm good. And I have a wife and two kids. And so that's not easy to say, but I was ready to go in that moment. And it was the most beautiful feeling I've ever had. And I had a call with a woman about an hour later, a Zoom session, and I'm sharing this moment. It was so close to the moment that I could still feel into it quite heavy. And I'm sharing with her this experience, and she looks at me, and she's also a pretty old soul. And so I know her experience is not to be shocked easily. But as I'm speaking to her and sharing this experience, she's in complete shock when I look up, and I was like, what's going on? And she goes, I have never seen that before in my life. And I said, what? She goes, you literally blurred in and out while I was talking to you. And I knew what it was. I reached out to a kind of a friend that was, perceivably a little bit more advanced than I was at that time. And she sent me a picture of Buddha sitting there with vibrations basically on either side of him. And she said ascension. And what I had tapped into at that period was basically what my body needed to feel to leave. And so I was getting a taste of that. And when I say leave, I just mean, because everything is overlaid on this plane, I just mean leave this vibration, this level of awareness. And so I kind of got a taste of what was needed, how we could tap into, and why love was so important. So my next experience that I had, which kind of lines up with this, was a message again. I would kind of get messages that were when I grounded into, when I kind of visualized myself in my heart, and that would be from Sophia, my perception. And when I went into my third eye, or rested there, I would get messages from Seven Kumaras. And I remember this joining of the two and coming together, and it was almost like this whirlwind of the three of us. And it was basically saying that you are us. And I got this understanding of this oneness at that time. And I remember them telling me what the meaning of life was. And they said, the meaning of life is love and the practice of it. And I have basically kept that in my pocket since that happened. And it is my message every single time I speak to somebody, because it's the most simplest message that you could ever have. It doesn't complicate things. We don't have to get into reptilians and the how many millions of years this existence is, and how the AI is coming in, and all these, a lot of complications, which I don't diminish because they're just perspectives. But how does humanity sit in those perceptions or stories, and do they serve us now? And I don't believe they serve us now. That's just my perception. I believe what serves us now is coming back to the heart. And so the meaning of life is love and the practice of it. And it just keeps it really simple.
I know you spoke of different names, but if we want to practice this breath work that you speak of, how would we find it?
Well, I was providing it for the last year every Saturday morning on Zoom, and it was by donation and free if you can't afford it. I love you either way. And so it was never about the money for me. I had a long lesson in that. I'll just kind of share a little bit of a story about that. So for me, again, back in about over a year, maybe 2 years ago now, I was guided to do this work for free, and I never fully understood it. And then in December, I was basically told that I passed a major life lesson and that I could start charging. And I got really excited, and I created this live program, and I created the breath work through Zoom. And some people are charging thousands of dollars to do this breath work in person. And so I made mine a lot cheaper, but still a lot of value. And that was how I was doing it. And I remember in March, I was launching it. None of the ads were going right. And everything was just kind of like, I was like, oh, there's something here for me. I'm missing something. There's a little bit of resistance. And I got this message, and it basically said, I needed to make it all for free again. And I was so nervous because I had a week to pay bills. I've got to give my wife some money, and I'm already feeling a heaviness from that experience with her and not being able to really bring in enough. But I, I I succumbed to that, and I made it for 80% cheaper. And I kind of remember getting a message and them laughing, basically saying, "Nah, you got to make it all for free." So I made it all for free, and the next day I got a couple donations, and the donations paid the bills that I needed to have. And so it was, for me, it was confirmation, and I had to sit in the understanding of why I needed to make it for free. And it came to me a few months later, which was basically seeing that it was the money that was the driving energy. Whether or not it was going to help people or not, the money was still the driving energy, not unconditional love. And the minute you can understand that unconditional love is the driving force in what you're trying to do, everything changes for you. And so I've had that over the last month or so, where money was coming in from donations that were 3 times the amount I was asking for in the original. And I couldn't explain it other than how this universe really works, right? Which is, if unconditional love becomes the driving force for everything, everything changes. Money is literally the wand or the middleman to creation, right? And if you think about it, why would God need a wand to create? Right? It doesn't. Jesus, I'm not a religious person, but the story of Jesus kind of bringing bread and feeding all of those people, it wasn't, there wasn't money involved in it. He just created because he knew who he was, right? And that, I think the large concept of know thyself, right? Know thyself, the journey of self-realization, right? That's what we're here to do, is to know thyself at the complete level. And to me, that's why I use the word love instead of God and consciousness, because it's what we are, is unconditional. That energy is, to me, is unconditional love, moving in all ways. So the breath work for me, I was teaching it on Saturdays, and I was guided to stop that recently. I will do, anybody that needs to or wants to experience that, I have a video that's pre-recorded, and I'm happy to sit with people. Generally, it can be a difficult experience for some to go through emotions like that on their own. I think I had gone through enough in my life, and I think I'm a pretty strong person to be able to go through stuff like that. But what I've witnessed with people, I had a woman that had given birth through C-section, and a few months later, she came to one of my classes, and she literally gave energetic birth in the session because she hadn't moved that energy through her in the natural way. And so I'm watching her, and she, like, the experience to watch was profound. I watched a woman in her late 60s leave her body. She was shaking. I thought she was having a heart attack. But some of these moments to do on your own can be difficult. And then the other thing with which a lot of people that hold these breathwork sessions, they're breathwork instructors, but they don't have a gift of psychic awareness, which can help bring clarity to some of the messages that can come through, or some of the experiences. And so my ability to feel into people and to allow what's coming through me to kind of bring clarity, I really find that people find comfort in that, and they can kind of settle into a perception of what's happening that is simple, and to me, I'll call level-headed. Because when certain people speak about dark energy attached to you, or black energy, or entities attached to you, again, to me, that's a perception, right? Which can scare people. And for me, like, I had a gentleman that was working with me, a young kid, and he went and helped a woman. He could jump in and out of people's bodies, which was mind blowing. And he could, like, he was doing telekinesis, moving tinfoil and stuff like that, kind of game tricks, I guess. But he went in and cleared a woman, and he was telling her things like this, that he saw an entity, he saw this black energy and sludge, and had holes in her aura. And she was really scared when she came back to me. And I said, look, let's look at this in a different way. So what happened to you is you cheated on your husband with another woman. And what you did is that you were stabbing your own heart. You were basically creating your own puncture wounds in your aura with your thoughts, based on what you thought you did wrong. And the energy that's on you, that dark sludge, is the perception, is the weight of your own thoughts again on what you did. I said, so you can learn to release all of that on your own, and you can learn to love yourself again, and that aura comes back, right? It doesn't need to be a crazy, well, not, I don't want to say crazy because it's still a perception, right? But I just feel we always have to ask ourselves, how does that thought serve us? And if it's creating fear, it's not serving us. And so a lot of us, or even in the spiritual community, are going through this, and we don't even understand. We're not even being aware of the perception we're spitting out into the world, and having others feel into that, entangle into those thoughts, when a lot of that doesn't serve us at all.
I think this is fascinating. So, this woman that cheated on her husband, how does she release the shame and the guilt?
Yeah, so that's a good question too. So again, it's perception of what took place. So with my initial experience with my father and my grandfather, when I first understood or could see it in a way that it was generational, it released a little bit of weight that I was putting on my father for what he did to me. And so that was the first shift I needed to release some of that weight. And as I shifted that, I expand into that new level of awareness. And so as I'm allowing, we'll call them truths. Truths are interesting because it's not a truth. It's not like this is a truth for everybody, right? It's truths that we hold, but the more fluid, like Bruce Lee used to say, be like water. The more fluid we can be with our truths, the more we can allow ourselves to advance or expand into the next truth. Right. And it takes and that's the kind of the deconstruction of the ego, as we would say. But again, even in that level of understanding, the ego is still just consciousness, right? It's not separate from, right? I'll kind of share that with you a little bit too. So I say the story that we, God or consciousness, we placed ourselves within a box to experience duality and separation. And in that box, it felt like darkness, which is what we'll call this long period, this dark, heavy feeling, because we were perceiving it. If you can witness this all as a crowd of people staring at each other in the eyes, chest to chest, you can only see it at that level. But then we, God, consciousness, decided to open the box, and some of us decided to get curious at that light, and we stood up into that expansion, right? And as we stand up into that expansion, that new level of awareness, things start to shift, but our feet are still rooted in the collective way of being. Right. And so if we're still rooted in that collective way of being, we're kind of experiencing something new, which is confusing a little bit. And that's why we'll feel people calling us crazy, because we feel crazy, because we're experiencing this difference, right? A polarity that doesn't just feel so familiar, but unfamiliar. So as you feel that craziness, people are going to, and you share your story, people are like, you sound crazy, man. This is like, how could you ever believe something like that? Well, it's coming from you because it's through you for you, right? And then all of a sudden through the journey, you'll have this awareness that you can step outside of the box. And so you have the courage to step away from the collective way of being. You start doing different things, you start meditating, you start breathing, you start eating better, whatever it is you're experiencing on your journey. And it's in that experience, which becomes really difficult, because now you're entangled in three different projections, I'll say. So you're projecting the 3D, 4D, and 5D experience. And so you're having these kind of experiences coming to you, through you, and you're having to choose the 5D experience more and more and more to be able to rest in that projection. But that's why you'll notice as you go through this journey, you'll fall back to the choices of eating poorly again. You'll fall back to not meditating. You'll fall back to going out and drinking with the guys and doing, again, not putting a negative and positive to those things, but these are just part of that old experience. And then and we'll experience that in, say, Mercury retrograde, which is like the two steps forward, one step back. You're going to always come back during Mercury retrograde to re-experience the old lessons, to make sure that you've detangled from those experiences. And so as we are in this new level of awareness, these new levels of awareness, you finally get the courage to pull your foot out of the whole experience, and you're now resting in the new one. And it's that detachment from the collective altogether, which is what I believe the ancient or old souls, however you want to perceive that, we're having the courage to step away from the collective altogether. And we're able to now, we're not really looking at it, calling it manifestation anymore. That's a different concept, again, based on the ego consciousness. We're now in creation mode. And now I'm I'm not creating a new car, a new house, I mean, it's okay, but it's not what I'm even thinking about. I'm thinking about creating this new earth we speak about. I'm thinking about humanity as a whole. I'm thinking as the great creator that I am, right? And I'm trying, and it's from this place that we shine our light so bright that now the collective looks at us and goes, what are they doing? I want to try that. That guy looks happy. That guy looks like he's in love. That guy looks like he's enjoying life. What is he doing? And now they get to reattach and we create a new collective way of being. Right? So it's these levels of awareness that you move through. And so you may not, for me, like I was saying, when you open up the front door to the heart, it was a simple journaling practice where I would list every moment in my life that I felt wronged. And all I would do was visualize those moments, and I would send love to that person, and I would say, I forgive you. For some of them, it was easy, and I would cross the list off and I would feel lighter. For some of them, like my mother, it was really difficult. And I had to create boundaries, which is not from her, but it's for myself to be able to not be triggered so much, because the nervous system is broken, right? We basically broken our nervous system. So we get triggered so quickly. And so how do you heal when you're being triggered so quickly in the moment? You create a boundary. And when you create that boundary, now you can go into yourself. You can, with self-reflection, you can learn to look at the situations in a different way. And as you decide to re-engage with that person or that aspect, you can see how well or how far you've come. And so you're kind of judging the triggers. And that's why I always say it's coming back to the breath is so key for the first level. I always say that the first step in this whole process is awareness. You know, we go that one day where you just become a little bit of aware of your patterns. And now when you become aware of your pattern and you find the breath is the next step. Once you find the breath and you start to heal the nervous system, now I can, instead of reacting to life, I can respond to life. And it's from that response that we can choose differently. And it's from that response that I can now detangle from the old experience.
Let me take you back, though, for a second or for a moment here, back to this woman that we were using as an example. When I asked you that, you gave me an answer of things that happened to you. And she is the one that's committing the wrongdoing. Like, you know, she was cheating on her husband, and she probably made an agreement with her husband that they're not going to do that.
Yeah.
So she was committing an act of that was against their agreement to do so. So in committing acts like that, how do you release those?
So that's it. It's basically exactly what I was saying, but in terms of her. So if her perception is that they committed to that, to not do that act. Mm-hmm. But in reality, before she came here, she actually chose to create that act, to learn from that act. Right. And so depending on what level of awareness she can come to in that, on her journey, that may be something it takes her a while to work through based on her level of awareness and expansion through her journey. So if she has guilt and shame, an easy way to look at that is the root chakra. I mean, not so the root chakra, the sacral chakra and the solar chakra. So you can sit in meditations, do early childhood meditations, because generally it's not that's part of her life. That's not where the root cause, and I don't want to say root cause, but her root experience, because she carried that frequency in here. That guilt and shame was carried in, and that was just part of the experience to kind of trigger a moment, most likely of an awakening. And so if you do, there's early childhood meditations that you can do to kind of, again, go back into the awareness of when you first experienced that guilt and shame and release that energy. You can use the solfeggio, I think it's called, the frequencies anyways. And so pure tones, these can help you with the vibration of those areas as you go through this experience, but I wouldn't say that they heal you. It's again, you have to be able to dive into your awareness of the situation. Can you see that I chose this experience? Can you see that there's no fault in what I did? We both chose this experience. And can I forgive myself, which is literally in a thought? Can I forgive myself in what happened? And do I need to move forward in this weight? Is that serving me to sit in that weight? And it's not.
Okay, that makes sense to me. And then at that point, once she's aware of all of this, She may either choose to stay in the relationship or not because she's learned her lesson.
Yeah. So again, the choice is interesting. So I want to describe this for you. So a lot of people speak about consciousness as a tapestry, a beautiful tapestry, and each of us is a thread in that experience, in consciousness, and in that thread is what we'll say a tubular experience, and in that tube is a treadmill going in one direction, and we have our life lessons set up. You can't avoid them; they're all set up already, and there's an energy coming behind us. And if we stay ahead of that energy, and you decide that you chose that that gold tie and that shirt, and you decided to go for a coffee this morning because you feel like you have free will. And in actuality, what's happened is that your higher self is guiding this whole experience, and your only job is to perceive it and think about the experience. And so if you stay ahead of the energy that's coming behind you, moving you through this experience, you feel like you've got free will, which is basically bound by the polarities of the wall. So that's why people have trouble manifesting. So if you look at your neighbor, they're like, oh, they've manifested their cars and they did it this way. And how come I can't manifest it this way? It's because your higher self saying it's not part of your experience. It doesn't fit inside the walls or of the tube of your experience. And so in that, it actually becomes a lot easier to understand that you just have to think about the experience. And it's those thoughts that are relayed to the higher self that kind of adjust your experience. So if you are not learning the lesson, he's still going to project that experience through you. And I say he, but it's all one energy, but it's just our level of awareness and that disconnection, right? But that experience is coming through you. And so the problem, what happens is that you can go through life like that, staying ahead of the energetic wall, listening to the nudges that you get, the feeling that you get. The minute you stop listening to those nudges, and the wall and the treadmill's still going in this direction, and you're clinging to the old experience, the job that that you got the nudge to leave, or the partner, the wife, the kid, the family that you were supposed to leave, whatever that is, it becomes, now the energy is still pushing you through the experience and you're clinging to it until it pops. And that ripping is how you feel bad. It feels, oh, that felt horrible. Because you're creating the resistance, your attachment to that experience. And that's why they say, like, the path of the monk leads to heaven, and heaven is just a mindset, right? So it's the path of the monk is being non-attached to anything. And I think that the Dalai Lama actually, he practices the death of himself and his loved ones every morning. And I've done that with my wife and kids. And I can say that I know that I'd be a lot further along than most people if they were to die tomorrow, if my parents were to die tomorrow. I know there's no death. I know that basically that those people, those aspects of myself are just lessons along the way that then integrate. So it's when you look back at your childhood and you see, and you think about some, grade one and kindergarten, these friends you used to have, you don't look back and constantly think about those people. But those people came into your life, those aspects or energy came into your life to teach you specific lessons at that age. And as you move forward, they're no longer in your experience. As you've learned from those lessons, they're no longer in your experience or projection. They've integrated just like the higher self and the ego. There's no separation. It's an integration of the two, the union of those two aspects, the Lucifer and the Sananda, right? And so for me, if my parents die tomorrow, I know we chose that experience for them to die because I'm strong enough to be on my own 2 feet right now. And now I get to wear them proud as they are integrated as the best pieces of them. Instead of going to the grave and putting flowers and crying and thinking of them dead and all that heavy thoughts, how does that serve us? It doesn't.
I think a lot of people are unhappy here and or suffering. And from what you're saying, I understand that a lot of our situation is because that is what our higher self wants us to learn, or there's a lesson there to learn from it. Is there a way that we can discover that lesson and move past it so we are here in bliss and being in a state of heaven, like you were saying?
Yeah, it's part of the unique experience of each individual aspect. So like some people I know have been awakened most of their life. Some people have been for the last 15 years. For myself, it's been a large part for, again, I remember when I started to slowly transition, but for me, it's been 5 years. I was guided to a woman last year. I don't like to use the word guru, but that was the word that came to me at the time, to be for this woman who was another soul family member. And she has gone through such changes in 1 year when it took me 5 years of experience. And I see that as this progression of energy as we're moving into this space, whether as above, so below, as the earth is moving into that place in the galaxy where we're expecting this great shift to take place. It's happening quicker and quicker for people, getting from point A to point B. So she originally she wanted to leave her husband. She ended up losing $150,000 in crypto, and then I told her that she needed to leave her job, which was also paying her $150,000. She had just crazy experiences along the way, but it happened so frequently. She signed over the house to her husband, like all these things that most people would be like, that sounds crazy. But the place she sits in now is so beautiful. And the change I've seen in 1 year from December to December is phenomenal. But there was no avoiding those painful moments. It truly wasn't, because her level of awareness was at a certain point, which perceived it in a way that created suffering. And so as you learn to let go, I'll give you an example. So she's sitting there with me talking about leaving her husband, and I realized in the moment, that she had an attachment to money. And generally my experiences I share with people, and they really hit home with people. The people that are coming to me are for a reason. We're connected for a reason. So I tell her she's got an attachment to money, and that she's probably going to she'll either lose her job or she'll have to leave it. It's her choice. So if she wants to grip to the experience, she can grip and she'll get it ripped, or she can do it on her own free will and stay ahead of that energetic wall. So a month later, she calls me crying. She wants to kill herself. She says that, she got $150,000 in crypto stolen. I had a similar thing happen to me. And I'll share that story after, but I walked her through it based on my story, and she was able to settle into an understanding based on the story I shared. And then for the next 3 months, I told her that she was going to need to walk away from the job, that it wasn't everything that she was projecting from the old experience was based on her frequency at that period. And as you raise your frequency, you'll find certain things you just won't interact with the same way. They won't be in your experience. They can't be. And so if that job was part of her old vibration, and I know who she is, so she didn't come here to just do this job. She came here to help humanity. And so in that sense, that job is her choice, how that's going to lead, basically. And so for the next 2 months, she was stressed out. She was angry. She went through all these emotions until the day she realized, I'm doing it. And she walked. And I remember that week, how unbelievably different she was, and how unbelievably free she felt. Even though she didn't have the money, she had no job, she's living in a house with her now moving through an ex-husband. But it was a needed transition, a needed experience. So you're going to experience pain in the beginning of this experience, because it can be traumatic in itself, really, right? We're losing my business that I worked on for 25 years, getting the cancer, getting all of it, losing my other business, watching my partner die. That was hard to go through, but it was my perception shift in those moments, which is, I believe, that trigger, that moment of releasing one of those heavy blankets to be able to see a little bit of that light and have the courage to follow it. And some people take longer than others, as I've watched. Some people just don't want to. They want to just stick with the ego, and they want to just keep beating their head against the wall. And that can be difficult to watch. And that's why you hear a lot of people saying, oh, I wish the sheep would wake up. And they're struggling to watch all these people. They're going through the pain. Why won't they just listen? It's like, that's not your job. Your job is that's why the word selfish has been demonized. It's a journey of self-realization. It's a journey to self. So the more you heal inside, the more the projection changes, the more you have an opportunity for people to quantum entangle into your experience. That's how you change the world. That's how we get to that point of heaven. The more I can sit in my bliss, the more you can see that, and the more you want to quantum entangle in what I'm doing, and the more we move together that way.
Ryan, we've been pretty deep in this podcast, and I feel that there are people who still have questions and may want to reach out to you and ask you. Are you open to that? And if so,
Always.
what's the best way to reach you?
Always. So I have an Instagram handle, Kusuma, KUSUMA.healing. And I'm there and I speak to people all day long. Again, my services are by donation and free if you can't afford it. It's all good. Most of my time is spent free. And when I say free, I want to explain that too, because I think what I've been shown is that money will no longer exist after we move through this period. There will be a quantum energy system that bridges the experience, but money will no longer exist. And when you sit with somebody in certain levels of awareness and you can feel into, when I'm finished conversations with people, I feel so energized. Like a coffee wouldn't explain how I feel. And if we're learning to raise our frequency and vibration, and I get that entanglement with somebody, there's so much more power in that energy exchange than money will ever provide. Right. And so I'm always here for people, whether they need energy healing, whether they need conversation, whether they want to understand things more clearly. I sit with people all day long. And so I'm always open for that. And I'm on Instagram.
All right. Before we finish up, do you have one last message for us?
Yeah, I do. I want to share a quick story. I've done a bunch of past life experiences on my own in meditation, and I was called to do the Dolores Cannon QHHT experience. And I had kind of had some awareness about the characters that I sat in before I experienced this, and I was still questioning a lot because my gift is a claircognizance, which is a knowing, and it's hard to kind of feel into the knowing, whether your mind's playing tricks or whether you really know things. So getting the confirmation in these sessions was really beautiful. And the second character that I experienced was so profound. I remember I was standing there, and it was the king of Atlantis, and I'm standing at this palace, and I'm watching meteorites, and I'm watching like basically earthquakes and water and people just being killed all around. But I was standing so calm, and there was this knowing that like I wasn't going to be affected by it. And it was really interesting to watch. It was hard to watch. And as it took me through the experience, I'm now in the most enormous water waves that you could ever imagine. It was so overwhelming. Nothing like, even if you've ever seen on TV storms, and this was enormous. Like I'm literally in this water. It was so wild. And then I'm on the beach in Kemet. It's just giving me kind of pieces in a way, moving through this experience. And then all of a sudden I'm standing on what feels like a platform with my twin Isis, and I'm speaking to my people. And I'm trying to speak to them. I'm trying to deliver this message that I know I'm here now to speak about. And it was the message of teaching that we're literally all God. We're all consciousness. And as I'm speaking to the people at the period of time when consciousness split in Atlantis, and that's where we experienced the wars in Orion, and we experienced the wars in Atlantis, and the black magic and the separation of light and black. The ego frequency or separation frequency had meandered through most people at that time, and so I was speaking to them about this understanding, and they were just pointing at me saying, "You are God," because I had a level of awareness and an understanding and gifts that people couldn't feel into at that time. They didn't have the capacity because the energy of that time was ego consciousness. And the message I got from this, again, I want people to understand that never have a connection to the character, right? It's what's the character teaching you in the moments, because that's all it's really for. And even in that character, it's still a projection. It's still a consciousness experiencing itself, right? The message at the end was, this is the message you need to speak of now. And this is the one that people are ready for now. People have the capacity to hear what you're saying. And although people do kind of speak about this now, I believe that the message that I have, even in that simple message of that you are God, and I got in quotations because it can be triggering to people, but I also appreciate that too, because triggering can help that healing journey. But consciousness, source, Allah, whatever you want to call that, it is you, it is me. And when you can take that small pinpoint of understanding and expand into that, it's unbelievable what you're going to be able to do here. And so these understandings of being able to fly, these understandings of walking on water, this healing with your hands, being psychic, whatever the mind can perceive, whatever your consciousness can come up with, you have that ability to tap into here and now. And it's, are you willing to let go of the old level of awareness and expand into the new? And so, yes, the meaning of life is love and the practice of it, but never forget who you are. Know thyself. That's my message.
Ryan, thank you for your message, and thank you for being my guest.
No problem. Thank you very much for having me on today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.